question to the Honourable Member for Middle, Mr Shimmins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister for Policy and Reform how many people have gained residency since 4th March 2020 by purchasing property on the island.
For the Minister for Policy and Reform to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I can confirm that our records show that during the period that entry to the island has been restricted due to coronavirus pandemic, 721 people have entered the island under Section 10A 2B of the Emergency Powers Coronavirus Entry Restrictions No. 2 Regulations 2020. This is an exemption category that relates to individuals who have a contractual obligation to enter the island, such as mortgage, tenancy or contract of employment. Our records do not separately distinguish those that have entered on the basis of purchasing a property. I can also advise that in the same period, our records show that a total of 1,748 individuals have entered the island on compassionate grounds. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Question, Mr Shimmins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for that information. Is it possible to split the 721 in terms of the number of people who come here for employment and the number of people who have purchased property? My understanding is that each of these cases is individually assessed based on the information that's provided by the applicants. So it would be very helpful, I think, for us to understand the migratory patterns if we could get this information. Will he undertake to come back to this Honourable House with that information so that members can understand what the makeup of the inward migration is? Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly will endeavour to. Obviously, the records themselves do not appear to separately distinguish. However, I'll certainly endeavour that if there's other information that we can pertain to get that information out.
Supplementary question, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In another place, I asked a question with regards to these exemptions and who was authorising them. And at that point in time, the Chief Secretary was able to provide family members who were part of the person getting the contract into the island. So could these figures, perhaps at the start, not be quite correct and were not in appliance with the law? And can the Minister confirm if a contract's not fulfilled, how the exemption's withdrawn?
Minister to reply.
Thank you. The exemption process is as much of the response to the pandemic, largely obviously relying on trusting that people will abide by rules and do the right thing. The process of applying requires an individual to provide evidence of their contractual obligation, which is the main means of checking the accuracy of what's been submitted. Obviously, any breaches of the regulations should be reported or can be reported to the constabulary or crime stoppers.
Question, Mr Shimmins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And just reverting to the Minister's response, it would be helpful also to understand how many of these new residents were over 65 years old and how many were under 65 years old, particularly as we look to plan future provision on the island. It would be very helpful to understand both the age demographic and also those people who've come here to work, perhaps in our health service or in education service or even in private sectors, and also those people who've just come to retire. So it feels actually it's really important we have a handle on this. So whilst I understand that it may be difficult to interrogate the information, I'm sure we do have the information. So I'm really looking for a firm commitment from the Minister to come back to this Honourable House with the insight that we need to plan our future services. Thank you.
Thank you. If that information is available, certainly we'll distribute it to members.
Question, Mr Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What data is available on the prices paid for these properties and the locations of them? And particular interest will be in those properties worth less than 250,000 and those over £1 million.
Thank you. I have doubts of that information regarding house prices, because a lot of that would be personal and private information regarding and linking that back to the databases. Obviously, if there is information that we can break down that 721, we certainly will do. Obviously, we do have a census in April that will provide us all of that detailed analysis, and that's going to be a key part going forward.
Supplementary question, Ms Edge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that does an exemption give a person the right to remain? If there's no end date to an exemption, does it give them the right to remain on the island?
Minister to reply.
Thank you. An exemption is an exemption to enter the island. It's not an immigration issue as such, and therefore, yes, of course, they could remain.
Supplementary question, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would the Minister agree that over 65, under 65 would lose a lot of valuable information? That was from the GP database. Would it not be better to break it down by 10-year cohorts or something like that when the information is circulated? And secondly, would the Minister agree that I don't think Mr Morehouse was asking for public information about the prices, but under the Statistics Act, I'm sure that the analysis team can actually reconcile using the excellent property database the information between the property and the transaction, which comes from the land registry database, which uses the same basic raw data enumeration.
It's a statement, but Minister.
I think it is a statement. Thank you.
Supplementary question, Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Would the Minister agree that the purpose of collecting information from people for the purposes of granting a border exemption is solely for the purposes of granting a border exemption, and we should not be trying to use this rather unpleasant experience to try and harvest data from people in order to make future policy decisions? The purpose of receiving this data at the border is simply to grant people an exemption or not in accordance with the regulations.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I do agree that is its primary focus. Obviously, if there's information that is that can assist in any other way, that's a good thing. But I would remind members that the primary source of information is going to be our census, and making that a digital census, that's going to be that's actually going to be a game changer in terms of getting that information and a smart services framework so that we can actually use government data better. We've got to be careful that people's data, personal data, is obviously protected. There's ways that we can use that, but my main focus, obviously, I think going forward will be that census.
Supplementary question, Mr Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Is any impact on the local housing market considered as a result of such a large number of people moving to the island in such a short period of time?
Minister to reply.
What I need to sort of take this into context, I think this is really important. Border restrictions have been a key measure in keeping our island safe during the pandemic, and obviously the Council Ministers have worked hard to adjust policies to manage the risk of the virus while allowing more people to travel, including some non-residents. In all aspects of the response to COVID, there have been difficult decisions that needed to be made, and obviously lines have had to be drawn. The provision to allow people to continue to move to the island was aimed at supporting the economy. All of this is a balance, and I'm alive to the fact that we will not get absolutely everything right, but overall I'm of the firm view that the controls of the border have served the island well so far and been crucial in protecting the community. Notwithstanding this, I fully appreciate the concerns expressed, and obviously will ask the Chief Secretary to provide Council with a review of the current provisions to see if they continue to be appropriate.
Supplementary, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why does the Minister think that the two questions I asked were not questions? To repeat, firstly, does the Minister agree that the Smart Service Framework means nothing if the Land Registry database and also the Entry Exemption database can't be linked for statistical purposes to understand inward immigration? And secondly, does the Minister agree that it would be more useful to have cohort analysis by deciles, 10-year periods, rather than just over 65 versus under 65 to understand inward immigration?
Minister to reply.
I think we're getting into a whole sort of separate debate about data, about the Smart Services Framework, and we're actually missing the whole point of what the border, my honourable friend Ramsey was talking about. The exemption certificates are specifically around the exemption of individuals into the island based on property purchases and employment. That's what its primary focus and purpose was.
Final supplementary in the original question, Mr Shimmins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I mean, it's good that the Minister acknowledges now that people are concerned. They're concerned about the impact on the housing market, and other people are also concerned about the impact on our demographics, not forgetting that we have one of the oldest populations in the world. So actually it makes a lot of sense to understand the dynamics of this inward migration. Would the Minister agree with me that it is important that he does not hide behind data protection considerations, because actually all of this data can be anonymised. So there's no question of breaching anyone's confidentiality, and it really would be in everyone's interest, including the Council of Ministers, if this data is published in short order. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of no point, sort of, if the information can be provided, then certainly I've made that commitment that it would be. It really is simple as that.